conquer Eastern Europe, and you dominate the heartland.
In the 1940s, America became fascinated by the idea that the Nazi plan for world domination was based on a perversion of the ideas of this Victorian geographer.
Deep in its mountains lie thick, rich veins of gold and silver.
Halford Mckinder had argued that with the advent of railways, the vast resources of the Eurasian heartland could become the basis of a great land power that could defeat any sea power. And American propaganda films told audiences that this was the basis of Hitler's strategy.
Conquer the world island, and you dominate the world.
So Halford, now in his 80s, was dismayed at the idea that he'd influenced the Nazis. And then, in 1943, Foreign Affairs magazine got in touch with him from New York and asked him for his thoughts on the geopolitics of the Allies' coming victory. And Mckinder proposed a way that they could stop Germany, once defeated, from rising yet again. To Germany's west, there should be a reserve of trained manpower, agriculture and industries in the eastern United States and Canada, a moated aerodrome in Britain, a bridgehead in France. And to Germany's east, if the Soviet Union, he wrote, emerges from this war as the conqueror of Germany, she must rank as the greatest land power on the globe. But by 1945, Germany was broken. The Nazi regime had surrendered unconditionally, and the country was divided into zones by the Allies. With Germany out of the picture, Mckinder's model came to foreshadow the emerging East-West standoff of the Cold War. The West and the Soviets were enemies once again. After pro-Soviet forces absorbed Poland and Hungary and Romania and more, the power who ruled Eastern Europe and the heartland was not Germany, but the Soviet Union. In America's Ivy League universities, academics had already been spurred by Mckinder's work to confront the risks of one power dominating the world island, and to map out the conflict zones along its coastal rimlands. Now, as the Soviets' reach expanded, Mckinder's ideas reached this man, a diplomat called George Kennan.
Imperialism often involved the advancing of the actual formal borders of your sovereignty.
And Kennan proposed that to prevent it dominating the Eurasian landmass, the Soviet Union had to be contained.
What they want to do is get puppet communist regimes in power in other areas.
On the 6th of March 1947, Mckinder died. But his ideas were very much alive. 6 days later, President Truman told the US Congress that America had to contain the Soviet Union by helping countries threatened with communist takeover.
It is necessary only to glance at a map to realize that the survival and integrity of the Greek nation are of grave importance in a much wider situation.
The United States was declaring itself ready to protect democratic ideals by using the threat of military force to stop a single power from dominating Eurasia.
America has decided that her true frontiers are in Europe.
As the mainly democratic West and the Soviet-controlled East dug in for decades of Cold War, America established a ring of bases around the Soviet-dominated bloc, from West Germany to Italy to Turkey and on to South Korea and Japan. Critics see containment as part of America's aggressive and imperialistic foreign policy. Others argue it protected democracy. Either way, it was still going 40 years later, when this happened. In 1991, moves towards democracy in the Soviet Union had unleashed demands for independence in the Soviet republics. A last-ditch coup by hardliners failed to stop all of the republics, from the Baltic to Central Asia, splitting away. But all this, and the trouble that followed, gave Mckinder's heartland theory a new appeal. With communism abandoned, the Russian economy was caught between broken-down old Soviet systems and the sudden introduction of Western-style capitalism. The shock nearly killed it, even as well-meaning Westerners flew in to offer their medicine.
We are going to be friends.
It produces very bad feelings here, that the United States interfere in our internal affairs.
And amid all this chaos and humiliation, new political thinkers began to emerge. One was a right-wing ex-dissident called Alexander Dugin, who managed to get a job teaching strategy at the General Staff Academy to the future leaders of the Russian military. Dugin drew deep on Mekinder's ideas to cast traditionalist Russia as locked in an eternal struggle for power with the liberal West, which, throughout the 1990s, seemed to be encroaching ever deeper into Russian life. In 1997, Dugin set out his ideas in a book called The Foundations of Geopolitics, which became an unlikely bestseller. And here he is lecturing recently in Shanghai, outlining his Mekinder-influenced take on antagonism between Russia and the West.
In geopolitics, there are two absolute opposite poles. There is sea power, that is the Western world, and there is land power, that is Russia. And the fight to control of the inlands in order to control the heartlands. That was the famous idea of Mekindar, who controls Eastern Europe, that controls heartland, who controls heartland, rules the world.
Now, the final countdown to the European Union's biggest ever expansion is only 11 hours away. The EU will officially expand at midnight tonight.
In the wake of their liberation from Soviet dominion, Eastern European countries queued up to join NATO and the European Union, fearful of future Russian aggression. But if Eastern Europe worried about Russia, Russia worried about NATO.
Seen from here, NATO's expansion sends all the wrong signals. It tells the Russians they're still not really accepted by the West.
Dugin followed Mekinder's theory to conclude that Russia should move to dominate once more the breakaway republics of the old Soviet Union, or Eurasia. And some writers have argued that Dugin's Mekinder-influenced themes have proved useful to Russia's leaders, keen to reassert their country's standing in the face of what they see as Western over-dominance. In 2011, President Putin proposed the formation of a Eurasian Economic Union. And in 2014, at this ceremony in the Kazakh capital, a treaty was signed by Kazakhstan, Belarus and Russia. They were soon joined by other ex-Soviet republics, but the idea of Eurasia as a counter to the European Union came into sharp focus in Eastern Europe. In 2013, Ukraine was in talks with the EU, but then Ukraine's President Yanukovych withdrew under Russian pressure.
The barricades are being built by protesters fighting to keep alive their dream of joining the European Union.
Pro-EU protesters occupied the centre of the capital, Kiev. Yanukovych sent in armed police, and the situation degenerated into bloody violence. In eastern Ukraine, there were pro-Russian protests, which became a Russia-backed insurgency. And in southern Ukraine, Russia seized its chance to annex Crimea, which, like the east of the country, has a high ethnic Russian population. But though Russia may rule the heartland, it does not control the world island. Eurasia is now home to another great power. In 1904, Mekindar worried about trains uniting the heartland. Today, China is stretching its railways across the Eurasian supercontinent. Relations between China and Russia are warm. But will Chinese expansion into Russia's old sphere of control in Central Asia start to cause tension? Mekindar-minded analysts think it might.
The lagoon is teeming with ships,
and the South China Sea, vital to world trade, is becoming the focus of a new geopolitical struggle for dominance. China has built whole islands to assert its claims to control. America is pushing back.
China has the sovereignty of the national islands, including its reef and its adjacent waters. Leave immediately and keep far off.
And there are signs that America's strategic thinking in the region is coloured by Mekindar's ideas. Mekindar argued that those ideas could help to stop a single state from dominating the world. As the great powers square up more and more, will his insights help to keep them in check? Or is it time to consign these century-old ideas to the past?